Sometimes it's not about laziness. It's not about a lack of motivation. And it's definitely not because you don't want it bad enough. If you've ever sat there, staring at your goals like they're locked behind bulletproof glass, wondering why the heck you're still stuck, even though you're reading the books, writing the to-do lists, saying the affirmations, this might be the most important thing you hear today. Because what if the real reason you're not making progress isn't on the surface at all? What if it's not about hustle or discipline or even procrastination? What if it's something deeper, more subtle, more sneaky, and way more powerful? Something that's quietly running the show while you keep blaming yourself for not doing enough. I want you to imagine this for a second. There's a guy named George. Super smart, ambitious, reads self-help books like they're snacks. He sets goals every January, big ones. He even tells his friends, buys a fancy planner, sets up routines. But then, nothing changes. Weeks pass, months pass, the excitement fizzles, his room gets messy, the habits slip, he starts avoiding mirrors, not because he's lazy, but because every time he looks, he feels like he's disappointing the version of himself he promised he'd become. Sound familiar? That's the loop, the cycle. You set a goal, get hyped, try to change your behavior, slip up once or twice, and then somehow fall into this emotional fog where everything feels heavy, blurry, and pointless. And then you beat yourself up for not being disciplined enough, not realizing the war isn't being fought at the level of discipline. It's being fought deeper, somewhere inside your identity. See, most of us are trying to build skyscrapers on shaky foundations. We chase productivity hacks and morning routines while completely ignoring the quiet, almost invisible scripts playing in our minds. Scripts like, I've always been average, or people like me never make it, or I'm not the kind of person who finishes what they start. These beliefs don't shout. They whisper, and because they whisper so quietly, we never think to question them, but they are powerful. They decide what actions feel natural to you, and which ones feel like foreign territory. They determine what your mind accepts as normal. So if you're trying to upgrade your life, but deep down still believe you're a background character in your own story, guess what? That belief will hijack your progress every single time. And it gets worse. Because when you fail to make progress, it reinforces that belief. See, your mind says, told you so. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's the thing that cracked my brain open. You're not failing because you're weak. You're failing because you're loyal. Loyal to a version of yourself that's no longer serving you. Let that sink in. A part of you has formed an emotional attachment to your old identity. Even if it's limiting, even if it's painful. Because pain, when familiar, can feel safer than change. And your brain, as wild as this sounds, would rather keep you stuck in predictable misery than risk stepping into unfamiliar growth. That's why you can want change with every fiber of your being and still sabotage yourself. That's why you can crave success and still procrastinate on the most important task. You're not lazy. You're protecting yourself in a backwards, unconscious way. Think about it. When you were a kid, maybe you were scolded for being too ambitious or too loud or too much. So you learned to dim your light. You associated boldness with rejection. Or maybe success felt like a setup. Like every time you got close to something good, the rug was pulled out from under you. So your nervous system started interpreting progress as danger. And now here you are, an adult trying to build a new life, but running on old emotional software. Crazy, right? But here's where it gets hopeful. Because once you become aware of these hidden scripts, you can start rewriting them. Not overnight, not with a single journal entry, but gradually, gently, like reintroducing a wild animal to trust. And it starts with this one simple question. What do I believe about people like me? Ask it. Pause. Really think about it. Do you believe people like you rise to the top? Do you believe people like you get healthy, get wealthy, build meaningful relationships? Or do you quietly believe that other people get that stuff? People who had better parents, better schools, better genetics, better timing? You'd be shocked how many people are unknowingly carrying beliefs like, I'm not the kind of person who can be consistent, or success is for people who already have money, or I always mess things up. These aren't just thoughts, they're blueprints. And until you change the blueprint, your behavior will keep snapping back to match it. no matter how many productivity hacks you try. Let me tell you about Jamila. She wanted to lose weight, tried every diet under the sun, keto, intermittent fasting, smoothie cleanses, but nothing stuck. She'd do it for 3 weeks and then binge out on a Thursday night and ghost the whole thing. One day she told me, "I just don't get it. I can't stay consistent." But when we peeled back the layers, here's what we found. Growing up, her family made fun of skinny people. They'd say stuff like, "She looks sick," or "She's starving herself just to get attention." Deep down, Jamila believed that if she lost too much weight, she'd be seen as vain or shallow. She didn't want to be rejected by her tribe. So even though she thought she wanted to be healthy, her identity was stuck in conflict. She wasn't lazy, she was loyal, and once she saw that, she cried. Because it wasn't just about food. It was about the little girl inside her who wanted to be accepted, who learned that blending in was safer than standing out. That's the emotional root. That's the part no productivity guru talks about. And once you start digging into that level, you start making real progress, the kind that sticks. So here's something you might want to try. Instead of asking, "What should I be doing?" start asking, "Who am I being?" Because every action is downstream from identity. If you believe you're a scattered, inconsistent person, even the best systems won't save you. But if you start believing, even in tiny ways, that you're becoming someone who finishes things, who follows through, who keeps promises to themselves, everything changes. Not instantly, not in a TikTok miracle kind of way, but deeply. And speaking of keeping promises, can I ask you for a small one? If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who's hungry for growth. You want real change. So do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. Not just for me, but for you. Because every time you show up for content that challenges your mindset, you're reinforcing a new identity. Someone who values growth. Now, back to it. One of the most underrated truths in psychology is this. The brain wires itself around what it expects to see. It's a survival mechanism. If you constantly expect failure, your brain will focus on signs that confirm it. If you expect to be ignored, you'll interpret neutral behavior as rejection. If you expect things to be hard, your body will literally tighten up before you even start. So the goal isn't just to do the work, it's to expect a new outcome. Not delusionally, not with toxic positivity, but with intention. You don't have to lie to yourself and say, "I'm the best ever." But you can start saying, "I'm someone who's getting better at this." That's believable. That sticks, and belief is the soil. If you plant good behaviors in toxic soil, they wither. But plant them in identity-rich soil, and they grow roots. Let's take it even deeper. Imagine your mind is a house. Most people are trying to remodel the furniture, better habits, better schedules, without realizing the foundation is cracked. That crack? It's the story you tell about who you are. And sometimes that story isn't even yours. It came from a teacher who said you'd never amount to much, from a parent who criticized more than praised, from friends who laughed when you tried to be different, from a world that didn't know how to hold your complexity. But here's the catch. Just because someone handed you that script doesn't mean you have to keep reading from it. You can start writing your own. But, and this part is key, rewriting your story requires repetition, not inspiration. You can watch the most fire TED Talk in the world and feel like a new person for 3 hours. But then your old identity creeps back in like mold in the walls. So what works? Tiny, consistent proof. Every time you say no to something that drains you, you prove you're someone who values your energy. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even if it's small, you prove you're someone who follows through. Every time you speak up instead of staying silent, you tell your nervous system, "We're safe to be seen now." That's how you change, not through shame, not through force, through new emotional experiences, repeated often. And that's why most people don't make progress. Not because they don't want it, but because they're trying to force transformation without emotional safety. They're trying to bloom in soil that still thinks winter is coming. And maybe you've been there too. Trying so hard to grow, but every time you stretch, something inside you pulls you back. That something isn't brokenness, it's protection. It's your body trying to guard you from the same pain you once couldn't handle. But now, you're not that same person. You're wiser, stronger, more self-aware. And maybe, just maybe, It's time to let yourself evolve past the old story. So maybe now it's not about pushing harder. Maybe it's about unhooking from the version of you that's trying to prove something to someone who probably isn't even watching anymore. Maybe that pressure you feel, that relentless buzz of "I should be doing more," it's not your future calling. It's your past echoing. Echoes of a classroom where you never felt seen, a living room where love was earned, a hallway where you walked a little smaller so you wouldn't get picked on. And somewhere along the way, those moments became a mirror, one that still reflects back a distorted version of who you are. And here you are, grown, capable, full of fire, still living by that outdated reflection. You know what's wild? Most people never question the mirror. They just keep polishing it. They try to improve themselves within a version of reality that was never designed to hold their potential. It's like trying to upgrade the software on a phone with a shattered screen. No matter how sharp the new image is, the cracks still distort everything. Sometimes real progress isn't about stacking more productivity apps or bullet journals. Sometimes real progress is sitting with the uncomfortable silence of, "I don't know who I am," without the struggle. Because let's be real, if your whole identity is built around surviving, what happens when things start going right? Because ease feels unfamiliar. Because success feels like a trap. Because deep down, you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop. So you beat life to the punch. You mess it up before it can disappoint you. And no one talks about this. No one tells you that joy can feel terrifying when pain has been your compass. That comfort can feel suspicious when chaos was your normal. That the first time you start winning, your brain might scream, "This isn't me." Not because it's wrong, but because it's new. You ever seen someone walk with a limp long after the injury healed? That's what most of us are doing emotionally, carrying protective patterns that no longer serve us. And until we become conscious of that limp, we'll keep adjusting our stride in ways that sabotage the marathon we're meant to run. That's why you keep looping. Why progress feels so damn hard. Because your nervous system isn't calibrated for peace. It's calibrated for survival. So now the real question is, how do you recalibrate? You don't force it, you teach it. Bit by bit. Like training a dog who's been abused to feel safe again. You don't yell at it for flinching, you sit beside it. You let it learn you're not going to hurt it. That love isn't always followed by pain. That attention doesn't always come with judgment. That rest doesn't mean you're lazy. That silence doesn't mean abandonment. And the training ground? It's in the tiny moments. When you say no to a commitment and feel guilt creeping in, and instead of over-explaining, you breathe through it and do nothing. When you look at your to-do list and your chest tightens, and instead of pushing through the tension, you ask, what's the pressure really about? When you wake up tired and part of you wants to label it as failure, but instead you choose gentleness. Not because you're giving up, but because you're learning to build from self-trust instead of self-punishment. You want to know a secret? Some of the most disciplined people you admire aren't driven by discipline. They're driven by clarity, by alignment. They've made peace with who they are and stopped trying to outperform their shame. That's why their actions feel so consistent. Not because they have superhuman willpower, but because they're no longer at war with themselves. Imagine how different your life would be if you stopped trying to earn your own worth. Seriously. Imagine waking up and not needing to prove anything today. Not needing to hit that milestone to feel valuable. Not needing to hustle just to silence the voice that says you're falling behind. That version of you? They move different. They speak slower. They breathe deeper. They create from wholeness, not hunger. And I know it sounds impossible, especially if you've been running your whole life. But healing isn't about becoming a new person. It's about remembering the one you were before the world convinced you otherwise. Sometimes I think about how kids walk into a room. No apology, no shrinking, just presence. They don't ask if they're allowed to dream. They just dream until someone tells them to be more realistic, more quiet, more manageable. And that's when the layers start piling on. The masks, the performance, the curated self. You want to make real progress? Take off the damn costume. Not all at once, but slowly, thoughtfully, bit by bit. Unlearn what the world taught you about your limits. Reclaim what they made you ashamed of, like your sensitivity. That's not a weakness, it's your superpower. It's why you can sense tension in a room before anyone says a word. It's why you see things others miss, why you love deeply, why you care, or you're overthinking. What if that's not anxiety but brilliance in disguise? What if your brain is just firing on more cylinders than most, and the problem isn't you, it's that no one taught you how to channel it? The parts you've been hiding? They're probably the best parts of you. And the sooner you stop trying to fix yourself, the sooner you start finding yourself. I once heard someone say, "You can't heal in the same environment that hurt you." And that hit hard. But sometimes, the environment isn't a place. It's a mindset. It's a pattern. It's a belief system so baked into your daily life that you don't even notice it's what's keeping you stuck. So if you've been doing everything right and still feel off, maybe it's time to stop tweaking your habits and start questioning your environment. Who you follow, what you consume, how you speak to yourself when no one's around. Because repetition is the mother of identity. And if you're surrounded by scarcity, fear, and criticism, you will absorb it. Even if you disagree with it, even if you know better, that's how powerful your environment is. Change your input, and eventually you change your output. It's not magic, it's math. You plant apple seeds, you get apples. You plant fear, you get avoidance. You plant peace, you get clarity. But the planting takes intention, and the soil has to be ready. So maybe today's not about doing more. Maybe it's about subtracting what's not you. Maybe it's about noticing where you're holding your breath and asking, why? Noticing which tasks drain you and asking, who told me this is what success looks like? Noticing the voice in your head that says you're behind and gently, firmly telling it, I'm not racing anymore, I'm rebuilding. Because that's what growth really is. It's not linear, it's not loud, and it's definitely not always visible. Sometimes, the most powerful progress looks like standing still, on purpose, choosing not to chase, choosing not to explain, choosing not to perform. Sometimes it's choosing to be misunderstood rather than misaligned, choosing to lose people who only love the masked version of you, choosing discomfort in the short term so you can finally breathe in the long term. And yes, it's hard. Letting go always is, but peace costs something. It costs the story you've been clinging to. The narrative that you're broken, the belief that you have to earn your spot on this earth. And once you give that up, once you surrender the shame, you don't just make progress, you transform. And if this made you pause for even a second, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep talk like this.